Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. We're continuing in Chapter 7, which is Utilities, and we're honing in on the issue of smart grid and smart cities. In continuing this chapter, we'll look at trends in utilities. Utilities are moving towards self-monitoring technologies with the goal of optimizing service while minimizing use of resources. Utilities are evolving towards a reliance on smart systems which monitor and communicate in milliseconds. The evolution of utilities requires designing better trenches and utility tunnels that allow for the ease of maintenance and upgrades of individual systems. What this means is that in the process of putting in new development and also new infrastructure, we plan on providing expansion for the future. This is different than utilities of the past where things were just buried and we didn't consider the life cycle of that utility. The following examples show utilities and infrastructure in the midst of revolutionary impartments in service focused on speed, interconnectivity, and the system-wide communication. This is in the areas of network resilience, public-to-private transition, and mesh networks. The first trend is in the network resilience. This is the transition from the typical hub and spoke to having a system of redundancy. So the hub and spoke would be such as an airline example that we have here with airports, that there's a hub that all these other airports connect to. That is different than a example of the web, which we have the internet here, where there's connectivity and redundancy. Should a computer go down, the network still stays functioning. Increasingly, energy and data networks are evolving as systems of webs connected to other webs, providing great redundancy. New dry utilities will form redundant layered grids, flexible networks requiring distribution systems that readily accept new lines. In the trend of public-to-private transition, we have decentralized utilities. This is an example of a wind microturbine, and so things are now, instead of a large centralized unit or a centralized system, these things can be on a property or a resident as one little single piece. Harrisburg utilities are already provided by private companies, although transportation, electricity, natural gas, telecommunications, and water and wastewater are regulated by the Pennsylvania Utility Commission, whose policies have a strong effect on quality, pricing, and distribution of utility services. In the trend of mesh networks, they're improvised and also resilient. Because the devices speak to one another, they are more than a series of hotspots with internet access. The mesh remains a network, whether or not it is connected to the internet, and that independence is its main attraction. So, and this is an example from the comp plan that the members of the Red Hook Initiative worked to create a neighborhood mesh network within Brooklyn. Transitioning into the next part of the segment, location, design, and placement, new development areas offer the opportunity to place resilient, adaptable service tunnels which allow easy access to utility systems without disrupting streets. And this is an image that shows the example of where these service tunnels could happen. This is important because it can help to connect with existing houses as well as new development that begins to build and creates a system that is really strong versus the old and aging infrastructure that is already there in place. It only makes sense as you look at the new federal courthouse that this would be something along 6th Street and 7th Street up from Riley to McClay and beyond. These are the smart trenches and utility tunnels. The city must coordinate utilities to plan, design, and build this important infrastructure prior to vertical development on these sites. That means coordination needs to be happening within some sort of utilities plan to see the bigger picture and coordinate with whatever utilities that are happening before new construction happens, new buildings happen. Even before they broke ground on the courthouse site, they were already looking at power and electrical distribution and communications distribution, but all that should have been also considered along the rest of 6th Street. So all of this design process is just something that happens in upgrading this entire street and this part of the city. Through a coordinated urban design, power lines should be underground on major streets, and eventually the city should coordinate with power, cable, and telecommunications for the phasing out of telephone poles, perhaps moving to a logical separation where dry utilities access property from the alleys wherever available, and wet utilities access from the street side. Targeted redevelopment in zones offer an opportunity to develop and implement utility coordination protocols. This just makes sense as we transition into a 21st century city. Other cities are following this process. This is something that we could do here and also do it in a way that this is what we do and this is how we maintain educating the population that's within the city. And there's an understanding of how we maintain these smart systems and also do the data collection and analyze this data appropriately so that we can be efficient and know when the systems are working well and any adjustments need to happen with maintenance. There can also be the mapping of city existing and abandoned utilities. This is part of the understanding and education application of our system in a smart city. Local college and university students could be instrumental in creating a coordinated map of the city utilities. Currently, all parties rely on the PA one-call system. We could be updating this and actually connecting the high skills that we have and we need in our city, and look at augmented reality to understand the utilities underground. So building the 3D models and representations of our infrastructure beyond the typical 2D CAD files that we have and the old infrastructure drawings that we have. This should be a common thing that we should be transitioning out of. As people retire from their jobs, the new process and new technology should be adapted and transitioned. This can be done within the local student population, and we can stop relying on external outside help and have trained within our own city borders. The other consideration to have is the wireless service and internet capability. As we're doing this transition of structure, we should be thinking about the overall citywide Wi-Fi. Other cities have gone this way. This is something for Harrisburg to consider. In the comp plan, it talks about the 5G networks. These 5G networks will be reliant on networks of small cells rather than to be huge towers radiating great distances. Some of that is because of the nature of the frequencies that are used, but a lot of that is also expand the network capacity. In the comp plan, back when this was written in 2017, we're looking at 2020 as a target that Verizon had. Verizon says fixed wireless, meaning the home internet, will be its first 5G application. 5G networks will accept small, inexpensive, low-power devices, so they'll connect to a lot of smaller objects and different kinds of ambient sensors to the internet. So we have the ability to do smart houses, to look at data collection and optimize what we run within our house. This is within our heating and cooling as well as our appliances. On the topic of smart infrastructure, the economic development and land use chapters call for Harrisburg to develop innovation zones which require significant IT infrastructure to be competitive. The provision of high-speed fiber and clean, uninterruptible power are basic prerequisites for technology companies to consider competitive locations. This is an example after Chapter 8, Economic Development, and showing some of those innovation zones around the city. These are all potential zones that should be planned out and considered. We will look at a utilities plan. This also overlays with a green plan, green space plan, housing plan. All these things are overlapped, and this is what is comprehensive planning. This all ties into our small area plans, so in the neighborhoods, they should be considering IT as well as new commercial structures build and housing builds around that. Continuing the topic of smart infrastructure, quite simply, smart infrastructure is efficient infrastructure. What makes it smart is the use of real-time data monitoring to optimize efficiency of a single utility and the coordination of optimal sharing of resources among different utilities. Efficient infrastructure delivering precisely what is needed when it is needed at the lowest price possible. Part of this smart infrastructure involves fiber optics, which are available most suburbs around Harrisburg. Fiber optic exists in the city, but it has served only large dedicated users such as the state. For example, Level 3 and Zayu have fiber optic network passing through Harrisburg. Verizon and Comcast state that they provide fiber optic service, but distribution is limited. Fiber networks are initially expensive to provide, but provide internet speeds up to 1,000 times faster than coaxial cable. That's a considerable amount of speed compared to what we really have now, and we look at how many users are online streaming stuff or doing gaming. This is important to look at as the city goes into the third decade of this millennium. To be desirable for a place to live and work, Wi-Fi must be available citywide. The city should facilitate the achieving of both these goals within 5 years. And we have a diagram that shows the differences between fiber optic and coaxial. At the bottom of this video, I have links for all this information for people to do more research. And here we have a quote from Judith Rodin. She was president of the Rockefeller Center until 2017. "We are building more than a network. We are building a movement. Cities learning from cities. Sectors innovating with other sectors." This is important about connectivity and how we can continue to grow in this information age. More discussion on smart infrastructure. If a house is equipped with a smart building system, smart devices within the house, such as the dishwasher, communicate with the grid to adjust their cycles to correspond with times of low energy pricing. The creation of smart energy systems takes time, but all new buildings and renovations in the city should require smart technology to advance the realization of Harrisburg as an optimally energy efficient city. This also ties into facilities management and also efficiently running buildings around our city. Rooftop solar electric systems and small wind turbines are now widely available. Companies are also starting to introduce home fuel systems which produce heat and power from natural gas. And lastly is wrapping up the smart infrastructure discussion. As larger houses and multi-unit residential buildings move towards home energy generation systems, the interactive capacity of the smart building smart grid will become more and more important. This helps us to start to achieve a sustainability and a high-tech transition. And as this infrastructure changes, so do the skills and jobs that help to maintain those. Thanks again for listening to this 52-week segment. Next week, we're going to continue the topic of utilities in Chapter 7. We will do a review of the city utilities from the comp plan and see who owns what and who takes care of what. Thanks again and take care.